Hi Becca, this is Fancy, and I'm looking at your design and comparing it to what you said about your latest interpenetration iteration. You're asking whether you have too many interpenetrations. You feel like they help the water aspect, but you're not sure if they detract from the fire in other areas. So I assume that when you say they help the water aspect, that maybe it's giving some form or interest to the water. I definitely see them here in the areas of fire, and I do see some that are kind of in those in between steps, not quite your chromatic grays though, but not your perceptual opposites either. So kind of on one end or the other, but not the perceptual opposite. So you're working with double visual pathways, and I do see the double visual pathways that you've created with the perceptual opposite of this pink color. However, the pathways that are represented by the other end or the other perceptual opposite are a little bit unclear. So I know this is a double visual pathway, and I can see that this is part of a double visual pathway. This might be a pathway here, or this pathway might continue, um, but it's pretty ill-defined. So as it moves in and out of focus through the water, I'm kind of losing your pathways. And I mean, we would lose the pathways as things become out of focus, but through continuation, we would be able to pick the pathway back up. So here, for example, I see a pathway, I believe, here, and then I see this one that's overlapping. But I'm not sure, where this goes once it kind of goes out of focus in the water. Where do I pick it back up? Um, And I think that's hard because your particular perceptual opposites, they're pretty subtle. Here they are right here. Um, so the stimulus color and its afterimage color are pretty, um, not a lot of contrast, which is fine. Not a problem at all. It's just going to make this, I think, a little bit more challenging. Um, so I will go back to your interpenetrations, but if you're working with double visual pathways, just like we did with the other designs, every part of the composition has to be part of a double visual pathway, whether it's, you know, primarily gradating with this stimulus color or with this stimulus color. So a lot of this area is out of focus, which it should be because you want lakes of water, but we need to know where to pick up that pathway once it comes back into focus. So I hope that makes sense. As for your interpenetrations, you've picked a really nice, definite shape. I do think it works well with this particular perceptual opposite pair because, again, you need something, I think, pretty distinct to be able to differentiate it in the water like you have here. That makes sense to me. But you have to watch out for kind of odd shapes, like now this becomes like the letter M because of the way you've got the notched triangle and this kind of polygon shape here. You don't get the same feeling here or here. So you need to perhaps get rid of this one, fill this little character in, this little module piece in. And I don't know if I would stick with triangles and these polygons. Maybe this one works better. Kind of a nice effect. It's nice and large, but not too large, and this one is a little bit too small, I think, to be noticeable. You could go with this larger triangle, I suppose, but I think this is distinct enough. It has kind of the feeling of bob wire in a way, and I think it works well. So you need to define your areas. I guess I would define my pathway. Make sure that every part of my composition is part of a visual pathway. And then in order to form these lakes, and these lakes have to be made out of these chromatic grays, so I'm thinking this is kind of the middle of your scale. There's like about at least two steps, or two steps, no more than three steps in your scale that are considered chromatic grays. Often you find them in the middle, but not always. They might be off to the left or right of the middle. So you need to make sure that every part of your composition is part of a visual pathway, and then have them go in and out of focus with large areas of lakes. But we have to know where, again, to pick them back up in the composition. So it's, like I say, it's easy to tell that this pathway overlaps with this pathway, and I believe that this pathway continues like this. Also, maybe not have your pathways make so many turns, not so many angles. Keep them simple so they're easier to follow. So this one seems to go this way, and then maybe this way, but then I don't know where this goes. It kind of disappears in here. So those are my suggestions at this point. Also, it's right now it's a little top heavy because your fire is mostly concentrated at the top. If you turn this 180, visually it would probably be more balanced because these visually heavier values will be at the bottom. All right, I look forward to your next iteration.